on camera, and I want you to tell me what's happening inside, because I don't know.
Okay. This meeting is about what they're going to do to the area, like putting swimming pools, zebra crossings, ice skate rinks, and how to make it better and change it a bit more. Thank you.
All right. And do you live on the estate?
Yes.
Yeah?
We live Maiden Lane Estate. It was Maiden Lane Estate.
Now, you're being naughty. You're not doing the proper interview.
Press that red button. There's a red
Press
button.
the red button. You did, didn't you?
Can I look through and see it?
On the stations, do we?
Yeah, well, yeah, that's right. They won't be
I didn't think that was interesting historically. There's a ton of time running out.
It might stay until the work's done.
Some
of these are quite nice. Some people want to keep these buildings. So if anybody's put preservation on top and you want to demolish it as well, you can have both on there at the same time. Yeah? It means making some of these buildings into housing for people. You can say demolish them and somebody else can say they want to keep them, and then we have a discussion about it later on.
What's that? What's that for?
These are the railway sheds, the old railway shed. Have you ever been down there and had a look at them? Right, well it's a bit difficult to think of them. They're quite a nice building, the railway shed. It doesn't need to be used for a railway shed, it might be used for something else.
Everyone look at my demolition key.
Doesn't matter if there's two of the same things on each one, you can put two on.
and change that into a car park.
I think that'd be a great idea.
I'll keep it, yeah?
Remember, right? Put whatever you want on, but don't touch anybody else's card.
Police station. Police station.
March last year. We have not.
The bill started.
Yes, we have not had a video report back in any way.
Thing going on downstairs in the community centre.
About the youth bus.
Yeah. It's all about, we're just having a little separate interview. Somebody, it's all about that. It's all about this love. You'll stick your head in and have a look, see what's going on.
So we.
Fast rate, we've now got 19 minutes. Sunday night. Sorry, I was just looking actually just to see St. Paul's there. See those two funny humps?
Yep.
That's St. Paul's. But we won't be able to see those again from here if the development goes ahead because this sightline's dead. Anyway, you want to start on start of the bill?
Whatever the thoughts are that take you, but you have been mostly handling our bill more than anybody else has, so.
Right. Well, back in June 1989, which is now nearly a year ago, in fact it's exactly a year ago, we finally started on the committee stage of the King's Cross Bill. Railwaylands group went in there. I remember this very clearly, because I wrote the paper, on the basis that we had to fight, therefore we had to fight from the beginning. But we didn't expect to get anything out of the House of Commons because of the odds stacked against us. It's difficult to keep that in mind now because of what's happened. Firstly, we focused on whether King's Cross was the best place, but we also increasingly focused on whether the bill was premature because of the absence of the high-speed link, as they called it then, and now just a rail link, as they call it, because even they object to the term high speed. We argued quite simply that you couldn't build a station that wasn't viable without a link until you knew you got the link.
Complete with special effects.
That's a dog in the background playing with the stone folks.
Community video. Real,
With a vengeance.
real community stuff.
And as that went along, the argument changed quite dramatically. British Rail started by saying that the autumn of 1989 the high-speed link bill was going to be lodged, and then it was put back for a year, and because of the arguments we'd already won, the committee were very concerned. They allowed the bill to go ahead for British Rail to complete their evidence, but there was obviously a very low pass mark at that point, because they demanded also that British Rail give them clear answers on what was going to happen with the link before they finished. British Rail didn't manage that when we finished the evidence in late March this year, after 50 sitting days, because they still hadn't sorted it out. But even then, they were expressing confidence that they had sorted everything out. Now, it's Sunday the 17th of June. Tomorrow, we're going back to the House of Commons for what we thought was going to be the Bill Committee's decision.
Yet again delayed.
Yes, yet again delayed by British Rail, because British Rail and their private sector partners, Trafalgar House and BIC, who together call themselves Eurorail, haven't been able to devise a rail link that works. And what they wanted was massive government subsidy. Now, as a group, we support government subsidy, providing for a decent scheme. But they'd hacked their scheme down until it was, if you're optimistic, second rate, if you're realistic, fifth rate, and still wanted massive subsidy. Unfortunately, the government isn't rejecting it on those grounds, it's rejecting it on an ideological opposition to subsidy per se. The net result is that there isn't a link. And the committee, instead of giving a decision, called us back. They're going to demand that British Rail explain what's happening with the link, where it is, whether it will be coming, whether it will ever get to King's Cross, and what that means for King's Cross and the low-level station. Obviously, we're going to argue again that it means that they shouldn't go ahead with this bill at all. We'll have to see. But I keep thinking back to what we said in November '88. We shouldn't expect anything from this committee. The pressures on them politically are incredible.
Excuse me, Bill, I'm going to throw. Excuse me, Paul. Can I ask you to go and
come in on this, Paul, anyway, because you might want to add things in.
Are you going to ask the questions, Dave?
No, you're asking the questions.
I've just been yabbering. But
Stand closer. This is
Yeah, if you want
intimate, distant. Closer still.
Yeah. Right, all right.
That's it. Good.
My dear.
We're great mates, really.
Yeah. But just, throw things in occasionally. If you feel like it. So far I've only talked about the rail link and the problems that not having it has created. But something else even more incredible has happened. Because everyone assumes that if anybody knows how to build railways and how to build railway stations, it's British Rail. And when we were unravelling the question about the high-speed link and whether the Thames Link line, as it's called, could be used for international trains, we discovered something else. That their drawings showed a station that was in the wrong place. It actually stuck out of the box where the bill said it had to be built. And when we put this to British Rail's engineer, when he was giving evidence, he said, oh, it's a mistake. So we asked to see drawings. And they showed us drawings. And the mistake had been rectified. They'd shortened the platforms. Now, shortening the platforms a little bit doesn't sound very important, except Channel Tunnel trains are nearly 400 metres long. That's nearly 1,400 feet long. And they shortened the platforms so that they were only 375 metres long, the longest ones, which is only 1,000 feet. So there were great chunks of the train sticking out at either end of the platforms. So we went back to the committee and said, this can't be right. And they agreed, and they demanded the British Rail come and explain what was going on. So they brought back this engineer, a man called David Snowball, who, to be extremely honest and extremely helpful to us, he didn't work for British Rail, he works for Rail. And he said, yes, it was a mistake. The first he knew about it was when it was put to him. It's one of the problems of living on this estate, is you always got the trains. That close.
You were mentioning the engineer who was
Yeah.
very helpful.
He said it was He said it was a mistake, and the first he knew about it was when he saw it on those plans that we put to him. It was a complete surprise to him until that came up. And then we showed that we had, through a local newspaper journalist, warned British Rail of exactly what was going on before he gave his evidence. And then it became clear that they hadn't told him. So they had to produce the project engineer, the actual BR official dealing with it, a man called Keith, who was the manager, and the man called Alston, who was the engineer. And they admitted that they had known about it, that it was the natural result of adding 2 extra platforms to the station, which they needed to do to make the link viable, even though it still isn't. That inevitably the station was not only going to get fatter by 2 platforms, but longer because of all the railway tracks having to spread from the lines. And they hadn't even looked. It was absolutely intentional where the station was. If they were going to have 400-metre platforms, that's where the station had to go.
Can I mean, I have to play devil's advocate here. I mean, from British Rail's point of view, they're going to say something like, this whole thing, as it exists at the moment, is a sort of fluid situation, in that I imagine when they start off, they look at it at a sort of conceptual level, and they say, well, look, here's a space for a terminal at King's Cross, and they move forward with that. But somebody lower down in the hierarchy, is actually working at the micro level, and he's looking at it and developing it from a very small detail up to something that is, you know, more tangible. And as he develops that, he realises that the space required is bigger than they thought when they looked at it at the beginning, at a more conceptual level, when the whole thing was being considered. And the same sort of things happening in the Channel Tunnel, where it seems that they can't really work out how they will organise the cars on the trains and getting the people out of the cars and complying with safety procedure. They're having to rejig it as they go along to satisfy different bits of regulations and legislation about how people in transit can be managed. And so they've spent a lot of time and it's all going on, but it's all still fluid and they're still tweaking around with it.
Yeah, but the difference between the two is fundamental. If you design a system for trains, you need tunnels for the trains. That's what the Channel Tunnel is. 2 train tunnels and a service tunnel.
Yeah.
When you then say you're going to put cars through it, obviously the cars are going to go on the trains. But the argument about the Channel Tunnel and cars is whether people should stay in the cars or be in separate compartments. And those people who are concerned about safety say people should be separated from cars. But that's really a matter of detail. It doesn't affect whether the tunnel is big enough, whether it goes to the right place or anything like that.
But it affects the viability of it all, doesn't it? If you've got to knock out a third of the car spaces to take care of the people while they're in transit, it then throws the whole economic viability of the whole operation into question.
That's true, but what we're talking about is something much more fundamental than that. What they're seeking is powers to take land away, destroy homes, destroy businesses, and to do that they had to say, this is what we want, this bit of land, we need a total station. And they said, that's the bit of land we want. And they originally said, perhaps I should have said this earlier, they wanted just 6 platforms. 6 platforms fit neatly into the land that they wanted to take.
Originally.
Right. But
in fact, originally wasn't even 4 before that.
Yes, but when they shifted from the idea of just 4 platforms up to 6, they took into account the fact that that meant that everything had to be a bit bigger, and they revised their drawings for it. But they didn't take a decision that they wanted 8 platforms until after they had set off on the bill and they'd published it. But nobody bothered to check whether they could really fit 8 platforms into the box. And the answer was they couldn't. And that's a bit like saying, I want to build a 3-storey house for a family of 5, and that will provide me with the 3 bedrooms I need, and then deciding, no, it's for a family of 7, and so I need an extra floor and an extra 2 bedrooms, but I haven't asked for planning permission for the extra floor. That was the position they got themselves into. And instead of being honest and saying, sorry, made a mistake, please can we have more land, as soon as they knew that they were in difficulties, they tried to ignore it. They tried to pretend it wasn't there. They tried to pretend the error was in the drawings that they put before the committee, not in the concept. And when we got down to it, the answer was they lied. Deliberately. And they've done it for 2 reasons. The first was to try and get away with it entirely, and the second was to give themselves time, in case we managed to push the point long enough and hard enough to call them to book, which is what we did, to try and fit long enough platforms inside the box. So they were doing work a year after they'd deposited the bill that they should have done before they even put it in.
So would it be true to say that the significance of the entire thing was A, showing that they hadn't actually done their homework anywhere nearly well enough,
It's not just that.
and on top of it then lied to the parliamentary committee about what they were doing in order to cover up?
That's a fair way of putting it in many ways, because they put pressure on themselves.
Can you put it that way rather than me putting it that way off camera?
Right. Yeah. British Rail set themselves a timetable for King's Cross, which they didn't pick for themselves as a railway company, because it dawned on them that they needed a second Channel Tunnel station after they denied that they needed such a thing. And it dawned on them that one of the possible sites was King's Cross, the land behind us. Their problem was that the land behind us, they'd handed over lock, stock and barrel to their property board to earn hundreds of millions of pounds for them, to fatten their coffers to allow them to be privatised. Now, there was no way they were going to develop it and then tunnel underneath a new railway station. So the only other option was to develop it after they'd got the powers for the station so they could build the station at the same time. So in something like 6 months, they threw together a plan that they thought was adequate in order to get the property development going. They claimed that providing an international station at King's Cross earlier than they needed, and their own word was premature provision of a railway station and a second terminal, was not unreasonable. They wouldn't even say it was reasonable, not unreasonable, because for about 6 hours a day they can get 2 Channel Tunnel trains a day to King's Cross and 2 Channel Tunnel trains a day from King's Cross. When they get the link, they can have 6 trains an hour throughout the day. That's the difference. But they rushed ahead with that. They assumed that it didn't matter.
Train coming, so might as well have a break.
They rushed ahead with that bill and they assumed that it didn't matter as long as it looked about right. And if it wasn't quite right, once they'd got it through, they could always come back and take a bit more land here and there just to tidy up, because they'd then own just about all the land in the area. They'd have got rid of the people who were objecting, the local residents whose homes would be demolished, and the wider local community who wouldn't see any point in fighting any further once the main battle was over. And nobody, it turns out, has ever said to British Rail, is your plan for this station realistic? Can you physically build this station in this space? And that's the argument we put up. We're now in a position where nobody knows for certain whether the plans that British Rail have got are capable of being built and working as a railway station. It may not be feasible.
But presumably they don't need to prove that that is the case at the moment. We're just going to find out about it in the long term, in 5 years' time, when they need to dig another 2 tunnels worth to enlarge the box.
There's two things going on here.
Presumably also rip up half the park in the process. But, sorry.
You're saying 2 things. One is that it's not feasible. You're saying it's not, even with 8 platforms, the question of its economic viability
It still depends on the high-speed link.
Debate.
Yeah.
And beyond that, there's also the whole cock-up about they really haven't got enough space to put 8 platforms in anyway. But even with 8, you're saying the economic viability is...
Yeah.
But if they got a link, maybe it would be, I don't know.
With a link, it would be economically viable. But every link proposal they've come up with so far, we've now had 5 that have failed, hasn't been viable. Perhaps I'm cheating slightly, because the first one I'm thinking of is when the 1972 to 4 tunnel project failed completely because of opposition to a high-speed link then. But since this lark started with King's Cross, they've had 4 separate attempts to produce a railway which worked and was viable financially, or even viable in engineering terms. And they still haven't made it. They have tried 4 times, they have failed 4 times. So that's the first problem. But the second problem is that to fit any station onto the land behind us here is very, very difficult for them. Because they can't produce the link, they've had to attach the station to these commuter lines, the Thameslink route, that comes up from Farringdon and goes under King's Cross and St Pancras, in order to have a station that's connected to a railway at all. And as soon as they do that, there's only really one place the South End can go if the link is going to come in as well. And that means demolishing 17.5 acres down in the, what we tend now to think of as the southwest corner, the bottom of Caledonian Road, bottom of Pentonville Road, top of King's Cross Road.
Acton-Swinton Street.
Almost that far down, but not quite, down to Britannia Street. And the link, if it comes in, I stopped saying when, would probably take out more housing in Britannia Street like Derby Lodge. So they've presented themselves with all those problems at that end. At this end, the north end of the site, they've said it's all got to fit into the Railwaylands. Now their excuse is that if they tunnelled further north to make their connections, it would cost a bit more money. And they claim that, for instance, they might have to knock down the end of the blocks here. Now that's just, that's only 50, 60 yards from where we're standing. And because of that, there is only really one place on the whole site that the station can go, because it's tied down that way. As soon as you move it a little bit, then the sharpness of the curves and the steepness of the gradients to make those connections rises.
So you're saying there's only one solution from DR's point of
From
view?
their point of view, there was only one solution with 6 platforms.
Right.
What we now really do not know is whether there is any solution with 8 platforms.
Right.
Although they claim there is. And whenever we've pushed and asked for specific drawings, they've been more and more reluctant to provide them. Because one of the results, for instance, is that on their original plans, they wanted to close a section of the canal, take the water out of it, and dig it up. Then they came up with this very clever idea of building quite short dams across half the width of the canal, and just taking the water out of those to build.
Right.
And that was brilliant, because that meant that the navigation on the canal could continue.
Yeah.
And we knew the canal would be preserved. And that was very important to the people who live on houseboats around here, and even the people who trade round here.
So would it be true to say that it was due to community pressure that solution arose?
Solution was found because of community pressure, and we were quite pleased with it. If the scheme was going to go ahead, then we'd far rather it was done that way than the way British Rail had originally planned to do it.
Could I come in with another question, Phil? Because we've come to... You want to finish something off?
I think it's better if I finish the point off. that was before the fiasco about the platform lengths and the widened box with the 8 platforms. One of the drawings that they won't really show us is how the new tracks coming out of the north end of the box tie in with the canal, and in particular with St Pancras Lock, because as best as we can lay them out, those tracks will go bang under the lock. All this idea about keeping the canal open falls to pieces. It just disappears. And it presents them with the massive problem of how to keep the water in the canal out of their workings and all the implications of that. So all that stuff that we were so pleased with appears to be so much rubbish. Now, in those circumstances, you start to wonder what's left to believe. And it's reached the stage that about the only thing we can believe is that the British Railways Board is called the British Railways Board. Anything else they say must be open to doubt. But you wanted to come back on something else.
I wanted to come back with a specific question. Given that we appear to have reached the limits of what could be done on the site, and we are questioning whether what they are saying can be done on the site, what implications does that have in terms of what homework British Rail had done on sites other than King's Cross before they arrived at that decision? And what impact have we been able to make with the committee, specifically, in showing up the lack, if that is the case, of the homework that British Rail has done on their needs?
Well, British Rail has broad criteria for deciding whether a site is suitable. It's got to have certain types of railway characteristics, it's got to be a certain size, it's got to have access for vehicles, and then all sorts of other more minor criteria come in. But the engineering criteria, if you like, whether it's physically possible to put a station there, are fairly straightforward. As far as we can tell, the only work they did on any of the sites was to decide whether those sites were feasible in engineering terms. And as soon as they were satisfied that they were, they could go on the list, and then other criteria like accessibility became the deciding factors. But what we now know is all the King's Cross analysis was done on the basis of 4 or 6 platforms. And those criteria, I wouldn't deny that it's engineering feasibility to put a station on. And that was the 3:30 to Sheffield. Still
On time.
Bang on time.
Yes, on time.
I've got 3:33, so
I've got it's pretty close. 3:31:52, which is just right.
I'm impressed. They got something right.
Oh, they can get trains to leave on time. That's fairly common. Getting trains to arrive on time is a little more difficult.
They're getting there. British Rail is getting there.
I've forgotten where
Sorry,
we were.
Phil, I'd like to remind you of an instance in good old LRC House where Doug Shaw was talking about British Rail and its studying of alternative options to include White City, King's Cross and Stratford.
Yeah.
And to quote Doug Shaw, and we actually have him videotaped on this, you read through the report,
Yeah.
and every page of the report seems to be pointing in the direction that, and obviously the Eurotunnel link terminus should go to Stratford.
Yep.
And you turn every page, and every page additional details confirm that view until you get to the conclusion. You turn the page for the conclusion, and the conclusion then says, so let's put it at King's Cross.
Yep.
Now that's the way Doug Shaw actually described British Rail's decision-making process about where to put it.
Yes. That report, which was produced in July 1988, was called Channel Tunnel Rail Services. It's actually the best report British Rail have ever produced. very high quality. The
Can I ask you to
go through.
lovely places, community centres.
Absolutely.
Community tends to use them.
Yep.
Sorry about that interruption.
That report was called Channel Tunnel Rail Services, and it was published in July 1988. And it was an important report because it analysed the operational need for extra capacity, and it went on to analyse the options for terminals. And it was very, very clear that really the two should be looked at together. Now, it's not because of that necessarily a good report, it simply was a very good analysis. There was analysis based on railway operations for the British Railways Board. The reason why the conclusion ends up by saying King's Cross rather than Stratford, although it doesn't go quite that far, is a simple one. British Railways is not run by the British Railways Board, it's run by the British Railways Property Board. They had picked King's Cross for the largest single development currently going in this country, or ever before going in this country, short of the new towns. And a major inner city site, and we're using that to generate
It's in the community
it's in the
centre.
community centre itself.
Downstairs?
Yes.
Oh, right.
No, we're just videoing an interview.
Yeah, okay, I didn't know how to get in there. Okay.
Down the
Just
stairs,
down
yeah.
the stairs
Right.
to the level below.
Okay, okay.
I think you were saying,
Well,
saying
let me-
something like it's... Oh,
hold
got
on,
it, you
yeah.
finished.
The property board had picked this site because they'd managed to get all the landowners, or the key landowners, together and could produce a site with a profit that was phenomenal, and were steaming ahead with that to fatten the coffers.
Would you call that asset stripping, in fact, as the primary motive?
Not asset stripping, and genuine asset development, even if one doesn't like the way they wanted to develop the asset, because what they wanted to put on it, or still want to put on it, is something
Yes,
like
but if-
7 million square feet of
Yes,
offices.
but if development of unused land is what determines how we operate the railways, which is the statement you made, then the motive has very little to do about operating railways and has more to do with property speculation.
Yeah,
You're
what
saying
it,
that
what it, no, what it has to do with is the fact that no bit of British Rail seems to know what any other bit is up to. The property board had gone ahead with its plans, was committed, had built the profits from King's Cross into its forecasts, which were being used to determine when British Rail was going to be privatised. So it couldn't pull back from this project, but suddenly King's Cross became an option for the second Channel Tunnel station. The trouble with an option is that you need to safeguard it, and the only way of safeguarding a railway station on a new development site is to build it. That was the problem. They had to build the new station,
That
at least with the development, if not before. And since the development was going ahead, King's Cross had to go ahead, even though at that stage they hadn't decided King's Cross formally should be the second Channel Tunnel station. It just, if they didn't decide it was, it couldn't be. Any proper business that was primarily concerned with providing railways, as British Rail ought to be, would have turned round and said, right, freeze the development. Take a proper view on where the station should go and how it should be linked up to the Channel Tunnel and to the rest of the network. And then we'll go on and look at what we're going to do with King's Cross as an area. Instead, we've got to get our profit from our offices, we've got to build our offices.
So let's see if we can stick a tunnel
the station underneath.
That's crazy. So you're saying that King's Cross is probably
I'm
not
talking
the
about
ideal...
Thatcherite economics.
Yeah, King's
Yes,
Cross
but
is
unless we
probably
bring
not...
it out in those terms, we are...
You're saying that King's Cross is probably not the best solution for a location for a European terminus. And that what's going on is that British Rail's view about where to put the Channel terminus is being corrupted by an economic opportunity.
That's right. There are two things. First is freight. No freight.
Sorry, first is?
The first is freight. Now, the only freight that will ever come through King's Cross is what is called high-value, high-speed freight. So that's going to be things like pieces of paper that are worth lots of money, computer tapes, that sort of thing. Not bulk freight. Not the freight that's critical
It's
to
like courier stuff.
Yeah, courier stuff. Not the bulk freight, not the manufactured goods that are critical to the north and
Not
to
raw
Scotland.
materials or foods and things like that.
Well, raw materials probably aren't the issue, but finished engineering goods, for instance, that currently go by road and ferry and might from, say, Sheffield take 8 days to get to Patras because they've got to go down to the Channel ports, across the Channel by boat, across France, down Italy, from Bari to Patras by boat.
I'm sorry. Can I interrupt this interview because I am actually after some pretty concise statements that I can actually use.
Yeah.
When we're on ferries to Patras, it has very little to do with King's Cross.
It has
If I
everything
may,
to
I'm
do-
sorry, I want this to be usable.
Yeah.
I don't want it to be
Sorry, I was
endless
trying to answer
rambling.
his question.
I know, but I'm addressing myself to the question.
Yeah.
And what the question launches us off on. Because we had a pretty strong point and I want to actually maintain a
Okay.
momentum.
Go on.
Yeah?
Right.
So,
There are two key issues about links with Europe by rail. The first is freight. Freight won't come through King's Cross.
break time.
Well, hang, stop the camera for a minute because I'll have a...
strength basis.
Yes.
So putting things on the top of it afterwards, not necessarily obviously.
Well, the question is, do you want offices on top of such a track?
No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is it allows the use of different areas of land.
Right.
Not as too prohibitive costs, but at the same time using the maximum benefits
Right.
of such a procedure. I know it's only been used for about 8 or 9 years, I believe, in Sweden and Norway, but I mean, they have found it to be pretty successful. When they're putting roads around mountains, obviously must have, and I can't understand why it's not being picked up by the English road constructors and things of that nature.
Well, so there's a general comment there about technology, materials and design standards. And I think those general comments could well be written out on a white card and just set down here, because it is perfectly logical to me anyway to make such comments about these proposals. There may be other ways in which this terminal connections can be accommodated. Is this true, Phil? Phil there knows a little bit about this. If you could briefly perhaps elaborate on this for us, Phil?
Well, I suppose I'm forced to play devil's advocate to some extent and try and put the position that BR hold publicly. Because what they say are, firstly, that there's nowhere else the station can go at King's Cross.
Yes.
Now, if I do this what mentally means the wrong way around and start where we are now at Maiden Lane.
Yes.
What they're saying is they've got to make the connections here, south of North London line, which is just behind us there. And that's to get connect the station to
It's sort of sweeping off here.
to the middle of the main line, which of course goes from St Pancras to Sheffield, Leicester, Nottingham and so on. And but again, that connection's got to be made before they reach the North London line electrified. They say it's essential because what they can do up at West Hampstead is build another little bit of railway from this electrified line as it is then, back onto the North London line, which they've gone under here.
Yeah.
Crawl along the North London line to Willesden, and then they'll expand it, build a new piece of railway to get them onto the West Coast main line, which will get them up to Liverpool, up to Glasgow.
Phil, in principle, is it fair comment to say that although this appears rather hard and fast, is it fair comment to say that if people were to make just general comments about whether it could be routed to avoid the impact or so on, that those would be not unreasonable comments?
British Rail's position is that you can't. Once you fix those 2 points, and down at the south end you're caught because you're connecting with the Thameslink lines, there's only one place where the station can go, and that's where they've put it. That's on British Rail's position.
Yeah.
But if you make connections further, you make the slopes slower, you make the curves less severe, and so suddenly that could come over.
Right.
But that still is on the assumption that you're connecting right down there with the Thameslink lines.
Yeah.
Now, British Rail's problem is that there's 2 Thameslink tracks which they initially want to use for both Thameslink and international trains. And then, if they ever get their link, because after all, this is the attempt that's just fallen to pieces is the 5th attempt they've had to get a link, and they still haven't managed it. And 0 out of 5 tends to be a fail mark rather than a pass mark. Because they say they want to come in with that immediately beside the Thameslink lines, that fixes the whole station.
Yeah.
And they're just about telling the truth when it says nowhere else it can go. If, however, you just have 2 Thameslink platforms, with a new Thameslink station, you can shift that whole thing much more into this area and get away with this.
Really?
And if a high-speed lift...
Could it, for example, go underneath the gasometers and in general, Phil, is it the point that these things aren't as fixed as they seem?
That's right. You've got more flexibility on the side, but then you come to the problem, you're still saying channel tunnel trains going here. What do you do with them? And that's where the critical arguments are. The British Rail said there's only one place in the route, and much where they've got it. What's being looked at is it coming in somewhat differently. Sort of where the Keystone Crescent, but not surfacing to about here. And so the station can perhaps be here. Now that might mean demolishing Bradley. But it will save all the housing and businesses just outside the development site. If that's the case. That's one possibility. Another possibility is that one of the alternative people who want to go to Stratford say there's still need a station at King's Cross, but instead of having it come in there, trains come in along the North London line. And just as this little route down, all this over here is Railwayland, quite open. You bring a spur off there, down this way, then put your station there, and have trains come in and go out either way. So you've got something that isn't connected to the Channel Tunnel at that end at all. All the connections of this end.
Well,
so that's how flexible it is.
Well, now, look, I think in the light of all of that, I think the general drift is that this tracing paper is the product of British Rail's proposals. They are seemingly not absolutely, 100% hard and fast. In other words, if you write comments about couldn't it go somewhere else or whatever, or could it miss Canley Street Park or things like that, those sort of comments appear to have, they're not meaningless comments, in other words, they appear to have some mileage, because it's quite clear that this terminal, certainly the link from Folkestone is back in the balance. Stratford must be a lot more to the fore than it was a few weeks ago. If they form a terminal at Stratford, do they really need another terminal at King's Cross? So on and so forth. So all I'm saying is, could you think about the trench itself, and then that's one piece of commentary, the actual alignment of this trench, and so on and so forth. The second, though, piece of commentary is, if this trench were here, and we already now know that it doesn't absolutely have to be here, but if this trench were here, what would we do about either decking it or not decking it, and if we were to deck it, what would we want on the deck? Okay? What?
You made it a community open ground.
Well, just write that as all
Why are you using such a system?
Here we are.
One of the things I'd like to Roy is, you say about taking the gradients out of the factory line, but it already starts the gradient the back of those factories, the way it runs now.
Yeah.
And the trains have a job getting up there, because where I sleep upstairs at the front, I can hear the darn thing. And you hear the train coming up first, and then all of a sudden it's going up the gradient, and I've got to give you full power. Now I'm talking about passenger trains.
Yeah.
Now they're going to start sending freight up that way as well. It'll be unlivable.
Freight isn't a problem. Although British Rail keep talking about this as the Channel Tunnel station, no freight will go through King's Cross because it's not safe for it. It's one of the sick jokes that you might think freight is very important. I might think freight is very important. British Rail doesn't believe in freight. Freight is something that they'll cobble in somewhere else somehow. What they're obsessed with is businessmen travelling first class at their company's expense, saving 10 minutes. That's what all this is meant.
Yeah. I happen to think very wrong. I happen to think that British Rail is thinking very much on that. And if you take all the environmental problems coming through, it's 80% of all the remarks that are being made is just to get freight off the roads onto railways. So that's basic. I know that. But what I'm turning around and saying is that it's obviously going to come very much to the fore of our arguments.
Yeah. We've got to understand the traffic that passes here is freight.
But why can't there be freight?
Because it's an underground station. Moving freight through an underground station is inherently unsafe.
Could you sort of do these diagrams, all these things? Because as you're describing them, I could hardly follow you, and there must be all sorts of alternatives that could be considered. And if people are going to do this whole exercise, sure, no, I didn't mean just, like this. I mean diagrams like that. So people could really follow. I know it's not a lot.
It's easy to say.
I've still got a couple of questions to ask you. Where is Agog Road?
Agog Road is here.
Just over here. Now they were talking about building a road over by the estate out.
Yes, that would develop the industry comes up here. This is the...
Is that on our estate or not?
Well, one of the worries is that yes, it is here.
Well, that is
No, that's why I said it's
apart from coming out,
you know,
the join
Or you mean just leave it, just cut them and place them
you've got
apart?
limited access to either on the road or the broken in a bad house. It's chaos every morning and evening. Well, I say morning, it can
that was your industry if you wish to put it that way. That's how things work. Right? Nowadays, as everybody's so convinced that there's going to be no manufacturing industries or anything similar, then what do they do with something that looks unsightly because there's no great necessity for it? Am I right or wrong? And I think that is where the real problem is. And that's why I'm putting forward covering something over, making it... It doesn't even mean to say that you've got a tunnel. All it means is that you've got to put a tunnel over, or you've got to put a bridge over.
But why not use it as a natural break between industrial and office?
That's what I'm trying to get at in one sense.
It doesn't, I mean, I don't see it as a severe problem.
Well, I think that the only reason I would consider decking over, I think we should have absolute freedom to develop this as you can. You know, use different methods of talking. That gives it absolute talking about gives you absolute freedom. It's not a big problem anymore, is it? It's not really a big problem.
And I honestly can't see why you have to keep the summits on. You know, there's nothing very nice about them. There's nothing very historical about them. If you want to keep a
you know that.
but I mean, but the point is that who the hell wants to see them? Why not do something imaginative in its place? There is one big problem, though, which is that you can't really use the land over GLC policy from about 50 years ago, because most of the land that's on there is unusable because of the gases that come through the ground.
Well,
Just the canal here.
I'm not talking about just a suspended slab, well that could be done very easily, and it does not cut. And if you could use it as the base, not as the first base, but in relation to making a road or whatever it may be afterwards. So in effect, it would have used as a noise saver as well, you know. Well, possibly. That's not impossible.
So everything goes up there?
Not necessarily, no. It's basically what you're doing is that you're allowing better a great deal more land, or reclaiming a great deal more land, than what you would be than what there is at the present moment. You could do, but it's a lot dearer. And this particular look, if you can have roads that's built around mountains and at the side of the rivers and God knows what, and it's acting a safe.
They are resting on the earth. So the polystyrene is to rest on the earth.
Of course. I'll concede that point too. But what you can do is in a light enough framework in order to yes.
Oh, I see.
Our model goes to about here, actually. Just about here.
So you've got the development here
That's
of
it,
the
industrial
industrial
estate.
estate. Right, I'm with you. Then you come down to the Camley.
Yes.
Right, I'm with you. Yeah.
This is the street.
But you think you're talking about putting lines up?
Oh, well, I'm not talking about
No,
that's
I mean
British
you're
Rail's proposals.
that's their
Yes,
proposals, right?
and that's in the LRC scheme.
I thought they'd left Camley.
No.
Camley Park.
Oh, no.
Not further.
This is the LRC one, isn't it?
Well, the LRC one is actually
Yeah, but when I went in round with LRC, yes, they put it down here, and they're going to deck the canal. It's an old place.
By 39.
49.
You never ask a lady her age. Don't you know that yet?
Yeah. 39. Where'd it come from?
I come from New York.
Oh, that's a long way.
Yeah.
So you're going to interview your friend
What else
then?
would you like to know?
I'm his brother.
You're his brother.
Yeah.
Oh, well, you should know him again.
Everything's a leg. Hey, you see? He's grandfather.
Yeah,
Big knickers.
have you put any suggestions down on the tables?
Yes.
What like?
Housing.
And have you demolished anything?
No.
Ah,
Have you
that's enough.
Have you built anything? Hey, Sal. I can't see him. Hey, bend down a bit, please. Hey, let me bend down. Yeah, what's your name and where did you come from? Oh, you're Bertha. What?
Morning, and the interview started. So Paul's going to ask you some questions. And each of you is going to answer without arms waving, like you've seen it on telly, yeah?
So, okay, right, here we go.
Our name first.
No. Okay, what's your name?
Kirk.
Kurt. What do you know about this redevelopment on this land behind us?
It's green. And it's black, and we put these little things, what might say, demolished, blow up on it, and keep,
Did you know anything about it before we came here today? Yeah, you did?
Yeah.
Where did you find out about that?
In a little letter,
In a letter?
in a yellow letter. Yeah.
What do you know?
No.
Sorry, what's your name?
Aaron.
Aaron, what do you know about it?
I know that they're gonna keep some of it and then destroy some of it to build better things like other blocks of flats, offices or big playgrounds.
Right, do you live here on Maiden Lane?
Yeah.
Do you like it here?
Yeah.
Not that much.
Not that much?
It's dirty.
It's dirty.
And
Why is it dirty though?
because the people are chucking rubbish all over the ground.
So it's not the buildings, you're saying it's the people that live in it. I
And
see.
it should have some more play area facilities. So the little children can play on the swings and slides. At the moment we've only got swings and they're in bad shape themselves.
So what would you... Listen, because this is going to go on for about 10 or 12 years, you're going to be in your 20s by the time they've finished building this lot. So, and you now, at this age, have a chance to tell people, to tell us, what you would want on that site. So, it's a long way off, like, not until you're 20 odd, but what would you like to have around here that you haven't got at the moment?
Like a swimming pool in the places where they ain't used much. Like over in that, we got a football pitch which has now got porta cabins in because they're doing some of it up at the moment. If they, after they finish, we can make it into proper tennis courts or do like a paddling pool for little ones. The council kept it clean so people could go in it.
So you think it's about more sports and playthings for kids that live there?
And making more garages because of all the cars are getting their windows broken.
Yeah. And
Radios
tyres.
nicked and tyres slashed. So more lock-up garages.
More lock-up garages.
Are there a lot of places to play now?
No.
I do.
Why is that? Are there playgrounds?
There's one playground over there, but it's only got swings at the moment.
And a slide.
Slide.
Used to have a climbing frame.
It used to have a climbing frame in other parts, but they took it down.
So tell me, you got any brothers or sisters?
Yeah, got one
That's
brother.
your brother? Right,
Yeah,
one brother.
one sister.
Three?
And one sister?
Two.
Yeah.
So it's your mum and your dad and three you kids?
No, four.
There's four of us, but my other sister don't live with us.
She's dead.
She's our stepsister.
Right. Do you think the sort of the houses on Maiden Lane are good?
No. Yeah, but they should have more bedrooms.
More bedrooms, but you like them? They're okay.
Yeah, they're okay.
Inside.
Yeah, little bit. Apart from the spiders.
What about your neighbours and the other kids around it?
They're okay.
They're all right.
Yeah. Some of them are a bit funny.
Some of them are a bit funny.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Because all the big kids go around and lick the footballs off us when we play football and that.
Who are these people that chuck all the rubbish about this?
Don't know.
It's a mystery. It's not you.
Sometimes.
Sometimes. So.
He chucks his little around. I keep most of my rubbish in my pocket or when I get in I put it in the dustbin.
But you think other people are not
Some,
as good as you?
No, some people do it as well. But it's just the occasional person just throws a little as well.
Who's breaking into cars then?
Some of the big, we don't know. I think it's some of the big kids.
You think it's the big kids? What do you think the big kids are? How old?
They're 15, 17, 18.
15, 17, 18?
16. I know they're like teenagers.
Teenagers. What do you think that happens in the state with the teenagers? What have they got to do? Have they got football pitches? I mean,
Still go for pictures, yeah.
is there a community centre? Where is this place? Do they have discos? I mean, what do these people... Why do these people... Here the question is, why do these people break into cars?
Because they're bored.
Because they're bored.
Just do it for fun.
They just do it for a laugh, yeah?
To sell the radio they nick.
Yeah, and what do they want the money for?
Buy cigarettes and stuff. Buy cigarettes.
Buy cigarettes and stuff.
Why is that so big? Normally you buy cigarettes as well.
Shall we ask some of our other subjects?
Listen, let me have a chat with these two.
Can you move a little bit to one side? That's it.
Okay. Come on, sit down here. You're going on the telly. You're not? You don't want to do it? Why? What's the matter? Scared? Yeah, no, you're not
Stage
scared.
fright.
Worried? Oh, we had a chat before.
Is this going on TV?
Is this another one of your mates?
Yeah, David, we're getting a view of you. On the telly?
Sit there.
Is this actually going to be on the telly? I'll be with him.
Just filmed you and then went away. Don't talk.
You've been taken already. I'm not saying that it's not good. On my face. Bill, come here.
Trying to keep away from I haven't been sending Sarah up yet.
We've lost control. We're going to be very
Because they are talking about
Sarah, I'm thinking we'll call it a day at 5.
Yeah.
And your name
People couldn't be greedy in Czechoslovakia, East Germany, Romania, Poland, Russia and things, because it wasn't allowed. I mean, apart from the political context and stuff like that. Yeah?
It's privilege. Instead of money, it's privilege. Like you get a bigger house, you get a car, whereas the other bloke gets...
Yeah, but I mean, there's such a minor number of people actually that had that it wasn't
gets so
stimulated.
difficult to manage the situation that you have to give like half the population privileges to keep the situation under control.
Well, I don't know, I don't think they did. I mean,
That's what's going on. It's an enormous bureaucratic thing. It's an enormous bureaucratic thing with a lot of people in uniform. If you go into East Berlin, you notice the first thing is half the population is in a uniform.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that they're privileged. They might be more privileged than people out of uniform. But it's still
they
not
don't have
privileged.
unemployment. They don't have unemployment. They have zero crime.
Yeah.
Hardly about a few
That's
people
not
in
true. I
prison.
don't think they
No,
have
there is some
zero.
crime, but like in comparison to the West, it's zero. Really. It's negligible. And there's a very small amount of people in prison.
Yeah.
Everybody's got a house. Everybody's got a job. Because if you ain't got a job, you're in the army.
I'm now proposing to actually close this meeting. It's about 5, and I'm going now to actually take the buildings off the model. The cards that are recorded on the buildings are mostly stuck down onto the buildings. All the cards on the panels are stuck down, and I have to store these here, and I shall record them all here on Monday. The next meeting is at Sir William Collins School on the 1st of July from 2 till 6, and we'll start with an entirely clean set of panels again and do exactly the same thing, hopefully with just a few more people. And clearly, after 5 meetings of this kind, right the way around the whole site, 3 in Camden, 2 in Islington, we'll then have to see how and if we can resolve the differing views expressed at these 5 meetings. But I think this meeting, although lightly attended, has produced an extremely interesting idea. And thank you very much for all coming. Very, very nice to see you. Thank you.